Today I want to talk a bit about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I got a chance to play it a bit publicly, actually. They made a group of YouTubers to go through some different types of content. I also got to muck around with it behind the scenes, but Pantheon still very much is in a pre-alpha state, which means NDAs, but I wanted to give my opinion on what I've seen, what I've played, and really just what I think of the title, as this will be the first time I talk about Pantheon here on the channel. The time I played Pantheon, I played a rogue, nothing to get that excited about, typical trickster or rogue kit, bleeds, poisons, hiding, crowd control, positional requirements for attacks. Standard disclaimer, game is in early development, assets will change and improve, yada yada. But for how early Pantheon is in development, this stuff means very little to me currently. So first, what is Pantheon, as I haven't really talked about it. Maybe I've mentioned it in passing, and that's because it's another one of those crowd-funded MMORPGs that will likely be released in 2020 or beyond, and you probably know my feelings about that. However, I put Pantheon in a different grouping because so many of these upcoming crowd-funded MMORPGs are going to save the genre with their new and exciting features and innovative gameplay never seen or implemented the way they plan to, and buzzword, 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 which is fine. I hope they succeed, but it's all just talk and marketing until I can see it and play it. Pantheon is in a different category of, instead of something new, let's revisit something that's old. Now, this has become a common tactic where games infuse specific features or talking points of older games into a more modern game's shell, hoping to catch the interest or say the right combination of words to spark someone's nostalgia, which, as an aside, you should check out this Hive Leader video on this very topic. But Pantheon is a special case even, as it's not just a new game with an old school sensibility. Yes, it takes heavy inspiration from EverQuest and especially Vanguard, which makes sense because of the overlap in the development team and specific MMORPG royalty being involved. But in words that they can't say themselves, it's not even that this is a spiritual successor or influenced by these past games. Pantheon represents the game that probably would have been made in place of EverQuest had it been made in current year, the same philosophies, the same vision, but with more experience, new tech, and less publisher influence. It's important to make that distinction, as in a reductive, sweeping generalization, this is basically remaking a proven experience that has vanished, that was played and loved and was top dog at the time, that they are uniquely qualified to do. With Pantheon, I get it. It's a known value to me. It's not like a lot of these games that are promising something that's never been done. I know what this is going to be. I grew up on these titles. I have a very strong idea of what the game's going to look like and play like when it eventually gets done. And talking with the good people at Visionary Realms, the people behind it, only reaffirms that. And then playing it, it brings me right back. Without getting too woo-woo, older games had a very specific feel. Many people try to explain that feel and try to condense it down to, well, they were harder, they took more time and effort, they were social, and I don't think that you can really boil it down like that. It's one of those, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts situations, and so it's a really weird place to be in on my end now to share my thoughts on Pantheon, because you either played those old games or you didn't, and if you did play, then all I can really do, and probably the best thing I can do, is to confirm that yes, it definitely scratches the niche that none of these old school influenced MMORPG games have done to date, and they are on the path that a lot of us have hoped that they've been on. Side shout out to Project Gorgon, one of the only other games I can think of that managed to capture a similar feeling. The game is ugly as shit, but it nails it. Now, if you didn't play those older games, it's hard to describe the appeal specifically because a lot of what I could say will just sound like making a game slower and more tedious and less convenient. And there's no hiding it, you can see the gameplay already. Early assets or not, Pantheon's gameplay isn't sexy, it's not young, it's not hip. Even checking out the website and the socials, the whole game and everything surrounding it, it's a relic. So it's not like there is some flashy reason to get excited by Pantheon even if you're not enthused by time to kills that are 4 times or more longer, or leveling to cap planned to be close to half a year with regular play, or the return of downtime between fights, or spells fizzling, or staying the hell away from action combat, any number of things people would call tedious and unnecessary and anti-fun. Yet if I let on that pulling enemies used to be a real art and a real skill as well as catching a pull, and Pantheon revives that, This statement on its own probably excites more people than you can imagine it would, yet if you weren't there for it, it's like, who cares? Why even mention that? And this really cuts to the heart of both my concerns and interest in Pantheon. There is going to be such a drastic divide in people who will be interested and those that will just write the game off after seeing it. And Pantheon is working in this double-edged situation where I can't imagine that they want to be reduced to, well, basically it's EQ3, but that's the appeal to probably the bulk of their potential audience as well as what's generating any sort of buzz for the game, and the more they stray from that, the more they may alienate that base, and without focusing on a way to entice new players to try the game, it's a weird situation because there are purists who saw EverQuest and games like it slowly transform into something that they don't like to try to capture new players, and they're going to be on guard for that happening. It's a weird position to be in that leaves me to think that what makes the most sense for them to do is just the inverse of most games and focus on very low growth but very high player retention. But then it's like, well, is that pool of veteran players large enough to support the game month after the initial nostalgia wave weakens? And will the company be okay with a market cap that's actually not going to be that big? Like, during crowdfunding, it's probably a huge benefit that the MMORPG old heads are middle-aged now. Even if there's less of them, they're probably all mid-career, more disposable income, they know what they want and like and can support it. But in regards to playing the game, with age comes responsibility and families and less time, so year after year that player base probably bleeds. Which, as an aside, I've been hearing about Pantheon for like 4 to 5 years now, and I play a lot of in-development MMORPGs, and it caught me a bit off guard how early Pantheon seemed to feel in its cycle. Talking out of my butt, I wouldn't be surprised with like a 2021 release date or later. But easily, my favorite part about Pantheon even existing, as well as classic WoW planned, is to answer, can you go back? Can you put the genie back in the bottle? If a project can do it, it's going to be one of these two. The designs, though, even to somebody who enjoys this design, and I'm excited to play Pantheon, I'm excited to play Classic WoW, it feels hella dated. And to the average gamer, will feel like a regression. It's incredibly hard for people to go back. Think about taking public transit until you got a car, or going from a hard drive to a solid state drive, and it's like, how did I live before this? You know, MMORPG-wise, we're seeing standards like AoE or auto-looting, quest markers, isolated features, group finders, mega servers, gear normalization, or like my own most hated feature for an RPG, scaling. And those are now the standard. Think about how restrictive it feels when games, not even just MMORPGs, don't allow you to jump, even if the jump serves no purpose. It feels so much worse when something gets worse than if something gets better. And also, there are some holes that players will even fill themselves if you left them out. Things like a third party or a website group finder, or auction houses, or quest add-ons, let alone the websites that data mine and get absolutely every single piece of information that becomes standard. And if you're already an MMORPG player, playing these games, you've already been trained and they have informed your habits and your preferences, and it'll make it incredibly hard for people who have played, say, World of Warcraft to turn around and play Pantheon. Think of the divide between World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2 players, and those games are incredibly similar. You know, in the MMORPG community, there is a very vocal, usually toxic, it was so much better back then group of people. And while I believe people online are a terrible representation of normal people playing and enjoying games, the reception will be really interesting to watch, especially in a consumer climate that is so hostile to anything but the most popular and cheap thing. I mean, look at EVE Online. It's such a great example. It's a long-running game, fanatic, passionate fan base. People usually have great things to say about the game or respect it even if they don't play it, and this sits at roughly 20,000 concurrent players, a sizable amount of them. If you've played the game, you know that they're all multi-boxers and alt accounts. If a new MMORPG got released that had those numbers, you would see everywhere about the game failing its game launch. People would be emboldened to call it trash, and I told you so. And those are the kind of numbers I would imagine are like best cased for a game like this. Those aren't even bad numbers, but that doesn't matter. Those are the kind of numbers that will elicit a response from the public and cause maybe a company to panic or deviate from their vision, as we've seen time and time and time again. It's rough because I saw such a small vertical slice of the game publicly, so there's very little I can talk to specifically, and most of it because it's combat. If you've played these games, if you've played any MMORPG, you should be able to kind of draw an opinion on the speed of it and the time to kill and what abilities are being used, how many abilities are being used, and get a feel for it. There's not much I can really add, especially since the class I was playing was pretty one-dimensional. So this video is really, or was really, an excuse to talk about Pantheon and a chance to say that, look, it looks to be on track, and that's really anyone who's following this game wants to hear. As it trucks on in development, once NDAs aren't quite the thing they are now, maybe even an interview, that would be kind of cool. We can talk a little bit more. But until next time, this is Fevir. Purse.
Gotta figure out where you all are and see if I can make it back to y'all.
Oh, you'll get he's
Dot damage has a chance.
I'm gonna let you take one more hit, Doc. Are you guys attacking him?
I am.
God!
We taking him out?
Yeah, what else are we gonna do?
I don't know, I did wonder why we were standing there.
Did you release Hive? I released, and nobody else has a res, do they?
There you guys got this. Just kite him.
Coming slowly but surely, guys.
Rank 1 Frostbolt, come on.
Standing.
I'm just gonna do some lead staff DPS here. It's alright, you got it.